campaign, and people had to shelter in the subway. So significant parts of London have been demolished, but it happened more in a distributed way for some reason. So there are a number of, here you see all the impact of all the bombs on London. So that the distribution. And then it affected indistinctly harbour infrastructure, but also neighborhoods. So, 40,000 people died, 50,000 homes were completely destroyed, and 2 million dwellings were damaged. So it's like about a third or a quarter of the entire city. No, more than a third or a half. So this is a series of maps that were done to, it's called the London County's bomb damage maps, with different colors. So the black is total destruction, purple damage beyond repair, red seriously damaged, and then orange is repairable. But yeah, like what you can learn from looking at these pictures, that it's affecting also like half of the built fabric has been impacted. So there was also a quote here from the Prime Minister. Who says the most painful is the number of small houses inhabited by working folk, which has been destroyed. But then already a positive message: we will rebuild it. We will rebuild them to our credits, more healthy, and I hope more beautiful than before. So there was already, it was the beginning of the Second World War, but this ambition to rebuild and to make the city better than it was. So the main person in charge of conducting this reconstruction plan was Patrick Abercrombie, who made with his team, in fact, two plans. There's a plan for the County of London, so the central part of London, and then 1 year after they made a similar plan for the Greater London, so the whole metropolitan area. And it's also explicit in the report is that this is more than just repairing the damage of the war. It's to modernize the city, to improve the perceived failings of unplanned development that occurred during the 19th century industrialization. So the bombing was more an excuse or an opportunity to modernize, to improve the city and all the issues it had from before. So there are two plans, and we will look at them in parallel. And it's an interesting plan. So first of all, it's based on a very extensive, comprehensive survey. So 2/3 or 3/4 of the report is just the analysis of the current situation. But also the approach is trying to maintain some of the qualities. We saw, for instance, Le Corbusier wanted to get rid of they proposed something completely new. Le Havre was also somehow quite different. But here, you see from this picture that the aim is to retain the old structure, what is worth preserving, and make it and then adapt it to make it workable under modern conditions. So it's a middle way between a total ordered reconstruction and the organic growth that has characterized the city development. So London, as a very liberal city, has grown very incrementally, organically, and you feel it also in the urban fabric. It's not so structured, it's more pockets that are next to each other. So the nice thing here is that it's recognized by a planner that this organic character is a quality of the urban fabric. It should be maintained to some extent. So we'll include the best of existing London, enhance its strongly marked character, and at the same time remedy its defects. So the plan was seen as correcting some of the main issues. So the plan is organized around 5 main issues to address. So urban sprawl, traffic congestion, overcrowded communities, jumble of function, especially conflicts between housing and industries, and the lack of open space for recreation. You remember, London has expanded also in a very non-controlled way, and therefore there was no room for no green space preserved in this process. So the first about urban sprawl, what the plan proposes. For instance, this series of maps were produced as part of the plan. So understanding the growing process. So the first thing they decided was to define rings, concentric rings, with specific regulations for each. So in inner urban, no densification. So to keep it not to make it overcrowded. So no new building was allowed except repairing damaged buildings in a modern interpretation. Then you have the second ring of suburban development, and there it's also insisting on the mix of housing and industries, so that it doesn't become only a dormitory suburb. And then you have the green belt, which is here, which is no new development at all except existing villages and creation of park and recreational spaces. So this green belt concept is a dream many cities have, and it's in fact it was invented and implemented here, but they managed to make it work. And then beyond the green belt, you would have a series of satellite towns, which then would absorb the population growth and having these different satellite towns very well connected by train. So this is very close to the garden city scheme. Remember, having a city center and then satellite towns and different crowns or rings of green, productive green spaces. The second problem was about transportation. So this is about upgrading of the railway system, also separating freight from passenger traffic. And then in terms of cars, also quite. So one of the there are many qualities with this plan. One is the quality of the mapping. So these are only surveys from the existing situation, but using this very simple technique of the intensity of the traffic is then represented with the thickness of the line. You really see how the city center of London saw a huge amount of cars entering. With some data here. So between 1910 and 1940, the number of cars has been multiplied by 20 times more cars in only 30 years. So generating a lot of mass congestion and accidents. So the proposal is to create concentric ring roads called A, B, C, D, E, so 5. And in order to divert the traffic, is the principles of a ring road. And in fact, they only managed to implement C, D, E, but the A and B in the city center, so it's the blue one and the red one and the black one here, was at some point abandoned because it would require too much displacement and demolitions. So the city was already too consolidated to implement these two roads. But for the rest, they are being, so the C and D road were implemented. Another third point is the communities. So how these communities are maybe not equipped like they should, but still being a very part of the DNA of London's urban fabric. So here a series of maps trying to understand how these neighborhoods work, what are they, who live there, so it was analyzed in detail, and then a proposal to clarify that and to equip it with the needed facilities. So the identity of the plan is to emphasize the identity of the existing communities with the mix each time of professions, family sizes, and socioeconomic groups. And where necessary, also reorganize them as autonomous neighborhood units with their own school, public buildings, neighborhood centers, shops, etc. And the picture you've perhaps seen already is how these different neighborhoods, which here are outlined, were then schematized, represented with what we call potato plan. So they look like cells. But it's also very evocative of the idea of having different neighborhoods which are juxtaposed and somehow autonomous, and in between having a green system that would provide green space, the proximity of green space, but also serve as a sort of framework. So this scheme of plan, schematic plan, is also very famous. That's why the plan is quite famous for. It's for this potato plan representation of the community. So the idea here is just to clarify each and make it autonomous and mixed, as mixed as possible. In terms of housing, this is just one example of how older, so what is called the world of the past, these slum types of housing are obsolete and should be renewed. And there was a project that started in the 30s before World War, which is shown as a good example. And the last one is about open space. Because the author of the plan also said that it's vital. It's vital for people's health to have access to green spaces for recreation. We didn't talk about ecology at that time yet. It was only about people using green spaces and breathing fresh air. And this analysis has been done at two scales, so at the scale of the County of London and at the scale of the Greater London. So the principle, which is quite obvious, is to keep the green spaces open, so to consolidate the existing green spaces in open spaces, and then to add more. So the darker green are like the proposed new green spaces. Most of them are in fact following the new infrastructures like these green roads. And the idea being to, so this could be at the scale of the county, to reach a sort of a park system, a mesh network of green pockets and more linear elements, which was also now it's something we all do, which seems quite obvious, but at that time it was quite innovative, the idea of a park system in a metropolitan context. And it's also nice that it considers the river as an open space. Until that time, the river was the working place, the most polluted one. But in this vision, the river was really seen as a part of this network. And so that would be the open space at the scale of the county. And also having numbered targets, like having 16 square meters of green space per inhabitant. You have, just for your information, the World Health Organization recommends 9 square meters per person as the minimum for like a city, so in terms of green space per inhabitant. And in Brussels, we have 100, Brussels is the world champion. I was really surprised because it has both public parks, but also we have many private gardens. And I think it's about 30 square meters per inhabitant in Brussels. So at the scale of the Greater London, it's the idea of the green belt. So to contain development and then to have a large open space, which is not only nature, it's also productive, but has these two functions. So to contain the urban growth and to also provide recreational land. And in fact, this idea has been around since centuries in London. And there was a famous plan in 1829 by Loudon with the idea of concentric rings. So it would be like, at that time there was only the city center. And he said we should then first put a ring of green space and then another ring of city to alternate built up and open rings. So that was a conceptual plan. The Garden City, which was discussed, was also inspired by the case of London. And finally, during the World War II and the ambitious plan, it was implemented. So the idea of fixing this green belt with very strong acts and policies, including buying the land. So the city bought the land to make sure it would not be developed. And it's still the case, and it has even become a policy on the scale of the whole country, the UK. So most cities have their green belt, which is quite remarkable and unique. And some cities elsewhere try to apply the same model, but at least here it's really working. So it's becoming a policy instrument for the future. Yes, so in terms of legacy and impact, so it was only partially implemented. So there were ideas for these 5 aspects: housing, transport, etc. But although it was only partially implemented, it created optimistic outlook for the people on the idea that we can manage our environment to serve our community and providing hope for the return of a great civilization from the depths of World War II. So you see all the symbolic importance of these plans was about confidence and pride. So it led to a number of acts, including the New Town Act. I will talk about that next week, but having satellite towns was also supported by a specific policy and act, and also a process of decentralization to the Town and Country Planning Act, giving power to the local authority to approve, to manage further developments. So these were the main results of this plan. But we can also learn a lot from it beyond the specific context of London as a planning method. So it was one of the first very comprehensive plans at the metropolitan scale, at least the Greater London Plan. And you see how it's done very seriously based on the survey and a quite sensitive approach to understanding the real DNA of London. And a focus on open space and communities. And then this plan is also very famous for the way it's being communicated. I think on the drive you have a video of the authors here explaining why we should implement this plan, why was the city of the past not good, and they do that in a very nice way. You have films, you also have a cartoon for children, so they distributed brochure in schools, in the army, and the exhibitions. So the importance of communicating your plan was already well demonstrated here. And then, as I mentioned, the potato plan has become a technique in itself. So Kees Christiansen was a Dutch architect and planner. He made a book remapping all the cities using the same technique of the potato plan. And the idea is to understand the role of neighborhoods and questioning the notion of centrality. So that by using this technique, you can maybe discover or challenge the notion of where is the center. All right, so this was London. I have one more case, which is Amsterdam. And this is very different. So we just moved from a very ambitious plan at the scale of the whole metropolitan area to a very small, decentralized approach for playgrounds, for children. So this is an initiative from the planning department of the city of Amsterdam, who, the city was not as damaged as Rotterdam or London, but still had a number of derelict plots. And the idea was to do little interventions to improve turn that into something usable and nicer. So they hired Aldo Van Eyck, who was a local architect from the 60s to 50s to 80s, together with colleagues to design playgrounds. And the program was to revitalize the city in these derelict plots, to design a playground, but also a place where the community would meet and gather, and to have it in a very dispersed strategy and minimalist interventions. So they made the first park in 1947, and it was so successful that at the end they made 700 of these. So here's some example, each time before, after. And so you can already observe the play elements. In fact, they are very minimalist. Now playgrounds usually look quite ugly with plastics, but here you can really feel it's done by an architect. There's also the idea of being open, so not fenced. Because by the way, the playgrounds before that time were based on membership. It was people paying to have access to playground. So the municipality here of Amsterdam said it should be open, but also physically open. So your kids are not that invited to stay inside, but also not forced. Another nice case here on the waterfront. And you will notice that the elements are always the same. So there's a catalog I will show you in a minute. So this is like a catalog of.
Yeah, I was wondering. The paved stripes on the floor, is it from shadow or did he use other materials or colors?
This is shadow. Yeah. So this pavement and this is the shadow from the building next to it.
So he did also change the building or?
You mean, yeah, this one maybe is another material, yes. This is maybe sand. But the big discovery I made while preparing this lecture is that it was in color, because I only knew the black and white pictures that I will show you now. So in fact it was much nicer when you see. So you see the kind of materials, pavement, sand box. So very simple elements. And all of them are part of this catalog. So with steel tubes, there are a few famous ones, the igloo, these steps also. And then it was using these elements and designing a specific playground, each time taking advantage of the context. So to play with the latent qualities of each place, in that sense being very contextual. So you have these modular elements, open and accessible, and also strategically located. So if they had to choose a place, then they would choose one which is visible, which is really also a possible connection across the block. So that's the total amount. Maybe there's more than, it doesn't seem like 700, but I know in total 700 were built. So you always see the same features coming back, but in another context. Yeah, the color really makes a difference. So what started as a very small project, in fact, had a very huge impact. First of all, because from one they went to 700, but yeah, most disappeared. In 2001, there were 90 still there. But then it became internationally known. So the architect was also invited to present it as part of CIAM. But then the way it's challenging the functional planning. So the functional is kids or playground only, housing, and things should be clearly defined and fenced. Here, there's much more openness and also taking advantage of interstitial spaces. We're all a kind of new way, much more contextual, much more sensitive to each place than what the rational planning, the functional planning approach used to be at that time. So it's seen as a kind of shift in the way we plan cities. This series of playgrounds where we're kind of announcing the shift that would occur around the late, the 60s, in fact, with the Team 10, with a younger generation of architects who would step away from the modernist, functionalist approach and be much more open for the human-centered type of approach. So it also, because it also included citizen participation in the design. So you create also already a sort of support where you make the playground. And yeah, there are some terms that appeared later, like urban acupuncture. I don't know if you've heard that, which was developed for Barcelona, so how you can regenerate the city with a few little interventions at the right spot, or tactical urbanism, or guerrilla urbanism, or do-it-yourself urbanism, how you can create this regeneration dynamics with very well thought but limited interventions. And the quote here from the architect is, functionalism has killed creativity. It leads to a cold technocracy in which the human aspect is forgotten. Architecture has to facilitate human activity and promote social interaction. That was it. Now let's have a little wrap up. I will again use the Can you still scan? Do you still have it, or should I bring it? Show the QR?
Do it again.
Yes. Okay. Is it? Yes. Doesn't show. Okay. Great. I need to show something here. All ready? So do you remember this model? You have the progressist model, the naturalist model, and the culturalist. Do you remember what culturalist is? More in continuity with history. So among the 6 projects we've seen, it's a bit blurry, right? Which one do you think is the most cultural? Can you vote for more than one, or you can only vote once? So nobody, that's clear. This one still had a bit of a continuity, like the main axis. This is really so. But who thinks this is a culturalist? Can I ask for what for that?
Do you consider the fact that such a large portion of our site is basically designers, so they're creating their own very designer city? So to some extent it could be, if it's just designers being able to do exactly what they want.
That's new, But if I refer to the definition, it's more really having a connection with the past. So maintaining some features, which I think in Rotterdam is not really the case. But so we clearly, that's interesting. London. So in which sense is it culturalist?
Like the autonomy that each neighbor has, and like the social network of networks.
Yeah.
And that they wanted to preserve the organic character.
Good. The same picture, but just another question. Okay, progressist model. Somehow you answered it by not voting it as culturalist, but by default it will be. So progressist is about embracing modernity, new ideas, new techniques. I'm not sure about these numbers. Somebody pressing 2 times? Or Oh, you spotted
Yeah,
very
that's
what
it.
exact place.
Yeah.
Did a good job here targeting the same spot. So Rotterdam is the most progressive model, do you think? Okay. Now, last, naturalist. A naturalist is about redefining a new relationship between humans, inhabitants, and nature, but also the idea of being egalitarian, so same opportunities for everyone. Ah, sorry. This is yeah. Okay. So mainly Hiroshima, using nature as a symbol for peace and using it even at the scale of the whole city, and London. Oh yes, so these are all quite old plans and projects from 70, 80 years old. So which one speaks to you the most? We are in 2024. Do you see some of these approaches applicable today? Of course, it depends on the context, but which one speaks to you the most? Can I ask who chose Rotterdam? Yes, can you explain why?
Because it's open to new ideas. Everyone is a designer in that sense. I think it's quite, it's quite progressive. It's always evolving. I would say. I think, and that's the mark of a good city.
Mm-hmm.
It's always open to new ideas.
Okay. You also working for Rotterdam?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think for many projects, I think this is one project that also considers the human scale predominantly. So you experience things in a way that's not just grandeur, but your eye level and something like above it. Not everything in a bird eye scale.
Who voted for Hiroshima? Anybody else? Yes? Do you want to explain why?
It is remains the historical places, and also now it's open for public and the tourists, so yeah, still remain some nature, so I think.
Okay. Maybe we'll go to Amsterdam. I think we have to make it. Oh, yeah, okay, so it's 12, 15, 13. Can you tell me why you think this decentralized little interventions are you like it?
I think that mainly because of the social approach that architecture and urbanism must have in our times, like after all that modernist movement. So I find it kind of lovely, and also like the small scale operations which are very necessary in our days.
Anybody else? Also voted for Amsterdam?
Yeah, because in like 2024, we don't really have like the tabula rasa of small power. So I think this is the most inspiring for the guys.
Yeah. Good. That was the last question, and I'll go back for a few more practical information. Oh yeah, maybe we can also look at these different projects, which were at the same time but in very different contexts. So what they have in common is that it was all about post-war reconstruction, rebuilding the city, and most of the cases there were starting from the tabula rasa, so really like a blank page. But then we can see, another very common character is that these plans go beyond just rebuilding the city after war. It's taking it as an opportunity to for London, for instance, to improve the industrial city from the 19th century, to repair the pride of the whole country. The Havre really had this ambition to embody the rebirth of the whole nation. So you see that in these different cases there was an additional ambition linked to the rebuilding program. Then you remember also when we think of who's behind, who's the driver. You have this triangle: the state, the market, or the civil society. Who's the main commissioner? Who's the driver of these 6 projects? State. Yeah. Yeah. So it was just after World War, so the state had all means, power, authority. Europe was also supported by the US with a reconstruction plan, so that was really centralized. And it's interesting if we look at, for instance, these 2 cases in France, that they had local architects and planners who wanted to make something more modest, very culturalist, like just reconstructing the city as it was. But in both cases, it came from the top, from a minister saying, no, I want this architect to make the Havre, or the industrialist who imposed Le Corbusier in the context. So many of these projects were also coming from above, looking at the top-down process. An exception is clearly Amsterdam, although it was also initiated by the state. It was the municipality planning department who took this initiative, but it's really taken into account the community. Then we already discussed this, how we can link to a model, progressist, culturalist, and naturalist. And then about the spatial principles. At that time it was all about being efficient, cost effective, using these standard elements that was very clearly shown here, for instance, with the Havre. But was there more than this? Were they all about being functional, or do you see other ambitions in terms of spatial principles?
In the case of Amsterdam, I think it's more than functional. It's definitely more cultural.
And in case of Hiroshima as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Some symbolic value of this in there, the open-endedness to stimulate creativity,
Also, I don't know if I can add something. I think this period also gave the chance to actually theories that emerged in the 19th century and 20th century for people or groups that thought they have the answer on making the ultimate city or the perfect city.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, this period gave the chance to actually implement some of these practices, and we all saw that most of them don't work as we thought.
Yeah.
And actually brought the modern urban planning that actually focuses more on participating with the people and actually preserving that organic growth of the city, because that's what actually makes a city, is the people. And I think it gave us like a really good lesson about how to approach modern urban planning in general.
Yeah, so you're right. So the main actors, the main planners here had their theory before. It's a bit tweaked of World War I and II, then suddenly they had the opportunity to implement it. And as you say, we could observe that it was in fact not working, and so it will be, and that will be in 2 weeks. Another thematic episode is about humanizing modernism. So how to involve the users, how to make the programs a bit more hybrid. So there was clearly a reaction to this wave of very functionalist planning after World War II. Yes, so little practical information. Maybe I'll start with this first. So for the examination, nothing changes. You will have to make a paper, 3,000 words, and a presentation in PK-ThP format, so 20 slides. And my initial idea was to have this PK-ThP organized during the semester, during the lecture time. But looking at the number of participants in this course, then consider, even if we take 10 minutes each, it would take almost all the lecture hours. So I propose to keep it for the examination, like in fact for those who know what was like that last year. So the PK-ThP will be presented in 3 days, so you will be working on in a group during one day. But that's, so basically you have more time to prepare it. The thing I would like you to prepare still for about week 10 to week 14, exactly when, is just a pitch. So 3 slides when you explain, this is the case I'm looking at. I think it's interesting for these reasons, and it relates to the course in that way. So only 3 pages, and that at least I know what you're working on. I can provide feedback. So that's the change. So you have a bit more time to prepare the big one, and I only need you to prepare 3 slides by let's say in 6 weeks. Clear for all? And then also by Monday, I'm curious about what case you are thinking of for your paper. So there's an online Excel sheet that you can fill in. I think it's about half of you have already filled in. So it's just asking who you are, this country, the city, the size of the project, and then 1 or 2 sentences explaining why you think it's a relevant case. So I will go through that one once it's full, and then come back to you. Maybe make some suggestions. If you hesitate between 2, we can also have a discussion. So this is a way for us to have a bit of feedback before you make a definitive choice. Is that clear for you? Okay. Good. Is it time? Yes.